You know that feeling you get when you spend even a little time outside? No matter how challenging it is to get out there, spending time in nature is always worth it. I'm your host, Amy Bouchatz, and this is another episode of Humans Outside. Join me as we hear from fascinating outdoor-minded guests and use the Humans Outside 365 challenge of spending time outside every day no matter what to push us outside daily. I've been a journalist for 2 decades, and I love asking questions, but I also love going outside. So why not combine the two? Ready to hear from experts and outdoor lovers who make heading into nature just a part of who they are while we work to do the same? Let's go. Hey humans! If you've ever taken a deep dive into the benefits of spending time outside, you've probably run into the work of the guest featured in today's Best of Humans Outside episode. That's how I first found her back when I initially started my outdoor habit experiment in 2017, spending time outside every day for a year. I was trying to decide how much time I was going to spend outside every day, and I hit Google for some research. The very first thing I found was Florence Williams' book, The Nature Fix, which was new at the time. She literally wrote the book on the science-based physical and mental benefits of spending time in nature, compiling research in a way that hadn't been done before and daring us all to get outside and experience those benefits. I was thrilled to welcome her to Humans Outside back in 2021 to talk about her work and why spending time outside is the fix we all need. And because we can all use a reminder of why it is we're out here doing that outside thing, I'm bringing back that conversation in this Best of episode today. Enjoy. Florence, welcome to Humans Outside.
Thanks so much for having me, Amy.
So we like to start these episodes just sort of imagining ourselves in our guest's favorite outdoor space, pretending that we're hanging out, having a conversation there, even though we're far apart. Where are we with you today?
My sort of magical spot tends to be by a river. And because I live in Washington, D.C. now, the river is the Potomac. I'm down there often. This is a wonderful time to be down there, actually, right this moment, because the shad are running. So there's this spectacular migration happening with thousands and thousands of fish swimming upstream and hundreds of egrets and herons and other birds sort of descending on the fish. And it's just a magical place right now.
I used to live in Washington, D.C. area, not far from where I think you live, from kind of what I gathered listening to your and reading your book. And I love that section of the Potomac. I love all of the flowers and just running along there, the green. It is a beautiful place to take a walk and sort of escape that city vibe, even though it does go directly by an airport. So take what you can get. So
Exactly.
Can you tell us how you found yourself looking to write about why people should head outdoors?
I mean, I would say it was really prompted, like a lot of my writing, by sort of personal inquiry. Um, I was really fortunate to, although I grew up on the East Coast in New York City, actually, after college, I went out west. I spent 23 years living in Colorado and Montana, small towns, really close to the mountains and in the mountains. And then my family moved to Washington, D.C. So I felt like this sort of dramatic personal change, happened almost inside my body. I could feel the natural landscape getting reflected in my internal emotional landscape. And I felt really stressed out. I was anxious. I wasn't sleeping as well. The big city was loud and monochromatic and expensive and just a generally stressful environment. And, of course, people get used to that. And I have somewhat gotten used to it. But it struck me as being so dramatic that I thought, what is the science here? How do our emotions get reflected by places we're living and by the environments? And what does the science have to say about that? And I was aware of the journalist Richard Louv, who had coined this term, nature deficit disorder. And I wondered if that's what I was experiencing and if it was real, if that was a real thing and sort of what the science had to say. And so, I was really fortunate. I got this assignment from Outside Magazine to go find some science actually currently taking place having to do with, environment and psychology. And So I went to Japan, and that's really where it all started. And eventually I realized, wow, I think there's actually enough going on around the world that there's a book here.
Mm. So I think we all intuitively know that going outside makes us feel happy. Um, can you give us a picture of that science behind why that is, what you found?
Um, yeah, it's only intuitive for some of us.
Hmm. Fair enough.
I've been surprised that a lot of people don't go outside. And, since I wrote the book, I get emails from people saying, "Oh, I read your book and now I go outside
Sure.
and now I see what you meant." So, while I think it's intuitive, I think a lot of us have become really disconnected,
Mm.
from that sort of natural hardwiring that we have. And what the science really shows is that, and again, this is from Japan, these sort of initial studies that I looked at, showing that even just after 15 or 20 minutes of being in a pretty forested environment and sort of being cued to be mindful in that space and to sort of pay attention to what our senses are perceiving and taking in, that our blood pressure actually drops, our respiration rate drops, our stress hormone levels drop, and our moods increase. And then other science has shown that our sort of negative thinking, like our rumination, um, goes quiet, while we're outside, if we're out there for long enough, and if we're able to be sort of mindful. And this is something, that the Buddhists talk about a lot. But it turns out that being in nature is kind of this natural meditative state where we're in the present moment, we're hearing the birds sing, our bodies feel a little bit alive, and our negative thought cycles really quiet down eventually. Sometimes it takes a little while. It takes longer than 15 minutes for a lot of people. And in fact, when people ask me, oh, I went for a walk, but it didn't work. I was still thinking about my shopping, my grocery shopping or whatever. And, what should I do? And my response to that is a couple things, but one is you need to probably go out for longer and also learn how to cue yourself
Mm.
to waking up your senses. And we can talk about that later.
So I find that, because I have this practice of doing this every day, right? On some days I do think about my shopping list. It happens. Um, but I also wonder if I don't have the space to think about my shopping list when I'm outside in a way that, like, I never even got there inside because I was so busy with everything else. And this is something that I really did want to contemplate, or a
Yeah.
big project or work or whatever. And now I'm outside and I have that release to be able to creatively think about whatever it is. Hopefully, it's something more creative than shopping. Sometimes it is.
Yeah, I mean, so those are really two different things. One is the shopping list, and it's kind of I feel like it's sort of a waste of time if you're or a waste of being out there if that's all you're thinking about, because being outside has been shown to do exactly what you said in the other part, which was be creative.
Mm.
So, there's oxygen flowing through our brains. We're sort of moving around, presumably outside. We're waking up different parts of our brains, our sensory brains. We're feeling our bodies. All of that is really conducive to creative thought. And so, yeah, it's great for problem solving. It's great for coming up with ideas. It's great for sometimes doing some writing, in your mind or in your head. I do that all the time. And it's not because I'm really trying. It's not because it's on my to-do list, fix this paragraph while I'm on a walk. It just naturally happens because being outside is conducive to mind wandering,
Mm.
which can be a really creative and generative and fruitful state.
When my family and I first started going outside, I noticed that the experience of being there in nature. Now, I want to back up for a second. Obviously, we went on our porch or, walked outside or whatever, right? But the difference there, what I mean is um, on purpose, right? Purposely seeking out nature adventures, purposely going camping, purposely spending time in nature. And I noticed that the experience of just setting up a tent was like watching my husband sort of take off this mental backpack. He'd start, it would take us an hour to get to the campsite. We would be really stressed out when we pulled in because maybe somebody had to pee and we had, just all the road stress, right? And by
Sure.
the time we had finished setting up what is admittedly a very large tent, so it takes a minute. By the time we'd finished doing that, it was like watching someone unload, and then this sigh of relief. Um, and so I know that you have done some additional reporting since the Nature Fix was published on the mental impact of going outside, specifically looking at veterans, which of course my husband is. So I'm wondering what you found about that sort of, I don't, mental unloading might be the wrong term, but release maybe?
I think there's a lot that goes on there, and it's kind of hard to parse out the science of it,
Hmm.
although people are trying.
Hmm.
Um, I did write about veterans in the book, and I also wrote about veterans after the book, and then I
Right.
also spent time actually with sex trafficking
Mm-hmm.
survivors on a 3-day backpacking trip, and I feel like I learned even more with them about trauma and what healing can happen outside. And I think, I mean, there's so many parts to it, but one is that when you have post-traumatic stress, as you tend to be sometimes very hyper vigilant. There's a lot of anxiety, there are a lot of nightmares. You hear a book drop and it sounds like gunfire. And so people who have PTSD are often they're good at actually shutting down their senses
Mm.
because that helps them get through the day. It helps them be calm. It helps them survive. And this is true with the sex trafficking survivors too. They had to kind of shut down their sense of feeling like they're in their bodies because their bodies had betrayed them. And their bodies were linked to trauma for them.
Mm.
And so what happens when you're outside is that it starts to feel safe to open up your senses again. Um, it's, what you experience is hopefully, if you're in the right kind of environment, for these kinds of therapeutic adventures, it feels safe. So there's maybe a beautiful sunset and there's a gentle breeze on your skin and there are birds, flying in the air and making beautiful noises. And so, you gradually start to feel safer opening up your senses. And then when you do that, again, your thinking brain and your kind of anxiety brain tends to quiet down a little bit at the same time. And so what I noticed is that people start sleeping better outside, they eat better. And this is because their nervous system is in, a different state that's just calmer. And that's when the healing can sort of happen. It's hard for the healing to happen when you're still in a high state of anxiety.
How do you then bring that healed or reframed mental state back inside? How do you transfer it?
Boy, that's a great question. And I think the science is really not clear there on how long the effects last.
Mm.
But from talking to people, my sense of it is that it's kind of like embarking on any sort of healthful diet. It's not like you eat broccoli once a month and then you're fine. You have to keep consuming the good stuff. And so I think the good thing that can happen here is that there's an awakening, a sense of connection to the natural world. There's almost a craving for it because you feel good outside. Once you can start to pay attention to actually how you do feel, right? And that's another
Right.
success story. And so then you want to make it a part of your daily life,
Right.
even if it's in just a small dose, even if it's having your morning coffee on the back deck where you can hear some birds, taking some time to just even look out your window in your house and look at some plants or look at the clouds. I call it microdosing. It's possible to sort of microdose beauty and awe. And I think a lot of us have found that, it is almost a daily practice for it to really have long-term effects.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we're doing here, right? The 20 minutes is a microdose in a lot of ways. Although I think for a lot of people, they would see, especially initially when you're creating that habit, 20 minutes sounds like a real commitment. Um,
It does.
and of course, when you realize that you found it all by cutting out how much time you're spending looking at TikTok, it doesn't seem like maybe quite as long as it once was. Whoa, how the minutes fly watching other people dance. Um, but it does create a desire to do it more. When I got to the end of that first year, I was categorically not done. I was
Right.
not interested in stopping. Now, I think it probably helps that I started and stopped on September, or my year ended on like the end of August. And it was really nice outside, right? And that was not intentional. So it's much
That was smart.
easier. Yeah, well, I mean, it worked out
Yeah.
well, but it was much easier to say, I think I'll go outside again tomorrow and not break my streak when tomorrow was not going to be, say, negative 16 degrees and windy. Um, if I had maybe tried and start and stop in January, I might have had a different attitude. Um, I really was not interested in stopping. And I now crave that mental space that being outside gives me. And that ability to sort of just it all and literally walk away for a few minutes in a lot of instances and then come back to it. I
Exactly.
also, yeah, and I also find that, that even though I definitely, would go look at a fire or mow my grass or whatever before my challenge, um, the intentionality aspect of creating that habit is really the game changing aspect there. That stepping away on purpose and not going outside on purpose. And I think that's what you're really talking about is when people send you these emails and say, I never went outside before. Well, of course they walked to their car, they went outside, right? But never with perhaps the intentionality that they're now experiencing thanks to your work. Does that sound right?
I think so. And also, part of that intentionality is finding the elements of nature that really speak to you,
Mhm.
and you're not going to find that necessarily walking down your driveway. But by spending a little more time outside, you can know that actually, I love looking at water. That's
Mhm.
what really makes me feel great. Or I don't feel safe looking at water. I want to be like nestled into a cozy forest and I want to hear the birds and see a lot of green. It's amazing how much variation there is, and sort of, what different people like. And I
Yeah.
really encourage people to experiment, see which environments really sing to them. Sort of where is your happy place? And that's where the intention should be, really seeking out those spots. And getting back to the sort of dose question too. I mean, I would say 20 minutes isn't really even a micro dose. I think that's kind of a substantial dose, really. I mean, the microdoses I'm talking about are, 30 seconds, looking at the clouds from your desk.
Mhm.
Look at a tree, go drink your morning coffee for a few minutes outside. Um, Even those microdoses, the science suggests that they really can help sort of clear your brain, help slow you down a little bit, calm you down, and kind of reset your stress levels in a good way.
So, but what I hear you saying at the same time is even those microdoses have an intentionality with them, right? You're not just
They
going
do, yes.
outside to get it over with or because you're about to lose it on your kid or something, right? You're going outside to get a dose of nature.
Yeah, I mean, the science really shows that when you are deliberate about it,
Mhm.
um, just the benefits are better
Mhm.
because, again, you're in a more mindful state where you're paying attention to what it is that you're experiencing.
I appreciate what you said about how there's a large variance in what people like to do outside too, because I think it's easy to look at, oh, I hate to say blanket the outdoor industry, but, or even Instagram or whatever, right? Whatever anyone else is doing and say, I am not doing this right, or the thing I like isn't adventurous enough or interesting enough. I think there's probably quite a few people who say, well, you live in Alaska, of course you like the outdoors, right? So my city street isn't good enough for going outside every day. And I, I don't think the science says that that's true. Am I off base on that?
No, I don't think you're off base. I think that there is a lot of variability. And I think the important thing, again, is to kind of tune in. Like
Mm,
it's tuning into your body, tuning into your emotional state. And it's amazing how bad we are at that. I mean, there's so much in our modern lives and culture that teach us not to do that, right? That distract us from it.
right.
Um, but but it turns out that we really need to do it to be kind of our best human selves. And you could totally learn to do it. You can learn to cultivate a sense of beauty, to appreciate it. Like little kids have it, right?
Hmm.
They have this wonder just naturally. And then we get kind of jaded and busy as we get older. But we can regain it.
Hmm.
And That's a beautiful thing. I mean, another thing I was thinking of when you were talking about your husband, taking off his backpack sort of mentally and literally, that I think what happens is that there's this sort of threshold that
Mhm.
people cross where they kind of leave, in some ways, they leave their human world behind a little bit and are able to engage, with their natural surroundings, kind of with nature. They're really able to almost be in a different place, a different space, where they're actually interacting, with nature.
Mhm.
Sometimes people call that like a liminal zone, right? And um, that's a really beautiful experience too, because it gets us out of our own kind of personal dramas. And it gets us into a place where we just feel more connected to the world around us. And in turn, that makes us feel more connected to other people too, not just the natural world. But when our own kind of ego shrinks a little bit, then we're more available in what's around us. And that's really, really good for our emotional health.
I love that casting it as available. It's another way of saying intentional, right? But it sort of reframes it as opening opening your proverbial schedule or actual schedule to receive whatever nature has for you that day.
That's right. Sometimes the act of seeking, is its own kind of stress. And if we think of it as rather than seeking as just waiting, being receptive, being open, um, I think in some ways it's a more restful place to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm definitely a seeking kind of person. So
Yeah, I am too. I'm too. I'm trying.
I hear that. So I don't want to cast medication as evil because it certainly is not. But we also know that, and if only because I deal so often with the Department of Veterans Affairs, which just loves to financially support medication over things like nature therapy. What is the medical community missing by leaning so heavily on medication, and maybe unintentionally or even intentionally dismissing this idea of nature as a semi-medical or actual medical option?
Yeah, boy, that's a big question. I mean, I don't want to sort of categorically disparage the medical community because there are actually a lot of practitioners and clinicians out there who are kind of tuning into some of this evidence and are telling their patients to go outside,
Mhm.
um, and maybe waiting to prescribe, drugs until
And
sort of other things are tried.
and we actually heard from Dr. Suzanne Bartlett Hackenmill a couple weeks ago or last week.
Oh, great.
Yeah, on this podcast. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of her work. Yes, exactly. So I think people are starting to catch on. What's interesting though is, like the rest of us, doctors have often grown up disconnected from nature.
Mm,
So, they were really great academics and they've just lived in modern life, right? And so they weren't, necessarily experiencing a lot of time in nature. And then in medical school, especially same thing, right? They're like in these artificial environments all the time. And so I don't really want to blame them. I mean, the system is sort of set up, to
sure.
be, of course, all these drug companies lobby the medical community. There's no one like lobbying on behalf of nature. No one is paying someone to go take doctors out to lunch and say, you should be smelling the flowers. So, I mean, just the capitalist sort of industrialist society is not really set up to sort of advocate, unfortunately, for time in nature.
Mm.
But that's where, people like you come in because you're talking about these things. And I think
And
it's
you.
really important. And so I think, we need to make sure that this evidence kind of reaches a popular audience, and reaches lay people. What I try to do is take what the scientists are doing and kind of make it more accessible. um, I think we need to keep doing that. And I think we also need to keep lobbying for things like greener schoolyards for our
Mm,
kids so that we don't have another generation of kids disconnected from nature.
yeah.
Um, I think it's so important to get our kids outside. That's something I'm really, really passionate about right now.
Yeah.
And of course, our spouses and ourselves. So.
Yeah. So when people ask you for advice on getting the most out of nature, uh, maybe just right where they are, as opposed to going to a wilderness
Mhm.
area, what do you tell them?
Well, that is really something I've been thinking about a lot, like many of us this pandemic year, where we've been largely stuck in place, not able to venture out to, our fabulous wilderness areas, maybe where we might otherwise go. And I mean, I've talked about nearby and urban nature for a long time, but I feel like personally, I have been very dependent on, the research that I did. Uh, and there are ways to really access, again, this sense of beauty and a sense of connection, even in urban nature. So I have certainly taken this to heart. There are certain things that I do to kind of put myself in the present moment, and I'm happy to share some of those. So even when I'm going out, on a walk or in a city street, I will try to really look around me, and I'll I'll try to wonder, like I'll ask myself, "Oh, are there birds here today? Are these birds different than were here last week? Can I see some birds or am I just hearing them? How far away do they sound? How close do they sound? Are there fractal patterns that I'm seeing in the trees or in the flower petals? Are there insects, crawling around that, have something to show me? And then I'm really very keyed into my sense of smell. It's kind of my superpower. And I also, for all of us really that who have a sense of smell, some of us don't. It is a direct pathway to the brain as opposed to the other senses that get kind of processed, through these other structures on the way. But it goes right to our emotional brains, and we can change our moods really, really quickly if we smell something wonderful. Whether it's something that may be evocative of some other, parts of our past, or whether it's just a beautiful smell. So, like, I am one of these weird people who's like constantly picking leaves and needles off of my neighbor's kind of shrubbery, and I'm crumbling it up and I'm smelling it. And then I'm walking, for many, many minutes or miles, like carrying these needles around and I'm smelling them. And then I'm, finding some other needles. So I would totally recommend that. And then, also looking up is a really cool thing to do in the city.
Mm.
So, if you can get out at sunset, right? The sky, the light is just cool. You can get out at night, kind of check in with where the moon is. I know we can't always see fantastic stars in the city, but we can see the moon. It's been really fun to for me to sort of, go out at night. I have a dog. I walk my dog. I check in with the moon. And I find that being outside in the dark like that also really is very, very helpful to my sleep.
Mm.
It helps reset circadian rhythms, to be in the dark. And also walking in early morning light is also really good for your circadian rhythms.
Right.
So they're just like these kind of cool things that we can still do when we're in a city.
I'm sort of chuckling because I'm imagining that a pocket full of good smelling needles is excellent, perfect protection against the Potomac, which doesn't always smell great. So you've got to do what you got to
That's a
do.
lot better than many parts of DC, I will say.
That's also true. So there you go. When I first started in my journalism career, I covered DC city politics, and so I spent quite a lot of time in all sorts of areas of DC, smelling
I bet you did.
or avoiding smelling all sorts of things. It is a beautiful, beautiful, very diverse place, but not all of it smells great. So that's kind of funny. And I wanted to say that anyone who follows the podcast knows I bought the hot tub was my pandemic purchase.
Oh, lucky you. I'm jealous.
Yeah, it's so great. And one of the things that I did not expect to love so much about it is that it has allowed me or pushed me, maybe it would be a better description, to comfortably be outside in the dark. Not something I had ever really done here in Alaska because
Oh,
when
cool.
it gets
That's
really
cool.
dark outside, it's
Yeah.
winter and it's
Yeah.
cold. And why
Yeah.
would you be outside in the dark and the cold if you could be inside and you had done a lot of time outside when it was light, right? So I just found ways to be outside when it was nice out or when the light was out.
And
But now,
did you find that it was helpful for your sleep?
um, I don't have trouble sleeping, except maybe in the
You're so
summer a
lucky.
little bit, because it's so light outside. But yeah, that's never been a real challenge. I'm a champion sleeper. Uh,
You
but
should be making a podcast about that.
I don't know. I don't even know how it's just born that way, guys. I can't help you.
You can make a lot of money.
If I could bottle it, I would give it away for free because
Please.
it is a wonderful gift. But I have been able to sit in the hot tub and look at the stars, which is not something I'd really ever done here because I was never outside in the dark.
Yeah,
And
that
I
sounds
never
blissful.
stopped to think about how that was true until I was sitting in my hot tub looking at the stars, thinking, I have literally never done this before. I've never
Yeah.
stopped to look at the stars here because I'm always, if it's the summertime and the weather's nice, if it's dark, I'm asleep. And if it's the wintertime and it's dark, I already went outside during the day and I'm back inside. And yeah,
I have
it
a
was
friend who I don't get up this early, but I have a friend who she likes to get up at dawn and she'll take a sleeping bag and just go sit on her front stairs
yeah,
and, drink her coffee with her sleeping bag.
yeah.
So, it just sets her mood for the whole day.
It's
It's really,
And in the summertime, I do start my day in the hot tub as well, like bright and early, like before 5 a.m. with my coffee
wow,
in the hot tub and just really watching the day start. It is a
that's
gift.
cool.
It's so nice. I do also own, everyone who's listened to this has heard me talk about the pants, capital T, capital P, and they're titled. And they are a pair of puffy pants, from Black Diamond or, Marmot makes them too. And, yeah, they're fantastic. They're sleeping
It's like
bag.
wearing a sleeping bag.
It is like wearing a sleeping bag. And I have
That sounds great.
we have a whole episode on dressing for the winter. So everyone knows I have
Nice.
no problem looking like a ginormous marshmallow.
Right.
Because I am warm and I recommend this to anyone else. If you want to find a way to get outside, and you don't really want to go, the thing that might be holding you back is that you're not comfortable.
For
Um,
me, what makes a huge difference is a hood.
a hood. Yes, we love the
Because
hoods.
it's annoying, right? If it's windy out, right? It's really especially hard to go outside when it's windy. And if I have a hood or even a couple of hoods on, it's like I just feel like I'm in a bubble and I love it.
Yep. Our winter gear advisor, Molly, whose husband helps run the Iditarod as an organizer, and they live up in the cold area, a cold area, the cold area, as if. Also recommends in triplicate hoods if possible. She's
Yeah,
quite
yeah, why not? Yeah,
quite hooded.
go
Okay.
for it.
So, I'm hoping that you could give us a couple of tips for capturing the benefits. Just get real practical. You talked about what you do. You talked about smelling those things. Is there anything else that people should know about really harnessing the benefits of nature right outside their front door?
No, I think that that's really the key is the senses. Think sensorially. So that is a shortcut to psychological restoration. Is to actually use your senses. And the weird thing is how little we kind of use them normally in our day-to-day lives. Like if we live in cities, we are spending so much time and energy filtering out kind of obnoxious sounds and obnoxious smells and being in a climate controlled environment. It's very understimulating and does not really contribute to our feeling sort of alive and vibrant. And so if there's one message I have, well, if there are really two, one is to just go outside, right, and just do it. And the other is to tap into your senses while you're out there, and then pay attention to how you feel.
Because we do such a good job of being overstimulated. I mean,
Right.
not even just in the city. I'm talking to you right now over Zoom, right? So we're looking at a screen while I'm talking to you. I've got just the whole world is an overly, oversensory experience with electronics in our homes. So we teach ourselves just to sort of like shut it down.
We're sort of overstimulated with kind of the bad stuff and understimulated with the good
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So we need to reverse that
Yeah.
formula.
Such good advice. Thank you.
You're so welcome, Amy. It's been great.
So we always close out with a couple of things, our favorite and most essential outdoor gear. So I'm hoping that you can give us some information about that. Is there anything that you use other than the hoods, or perhaps it's just the hoods that you love? I've had some people say snacks, by the way, is their most favorite and their most essential. So that's a
I would say it's probably pants. I I wear hiking pants all the time. They're a little bit windproof, they're tick proof. So I feel like I can kind of tromp around the woods in Washington. Um, and they're lightweight. I like ones made by Arc'teryx. I also like ones made by Prana. But they're pretty basic. And yeah, I
Yeah.
recommend them.
Yeah. Got to find a brand or a pair that fits you really good and stick with it.
Yeah, and it's nice to have the pockets and
Yeah.
the sort of tear-proof fabric.
Yeah.
And yeah, and they're good for breathability and stuff. So yeah, I tromp around in those all the time.
Absolutely. Never underestimate the power of a good pair of pants, whether it be hiking pants or the pants.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then we always like to close ourselves out hearing about our guest's favorite outdoor moment, so that we can close our eyes and just imagine ourselves in a time and a spot that really made you happy. So if you close your eyes and think of your favorite outdoor moment ever, where are you and what are you doing?
A couple of years ago, I mean, I know exactly the moment. A couple of years ago, I did a big river trip down the Green River in Utah. It was a 30-day trip. And I was by myself for the last couple of weeks of it. And towards the end, it was really hot. I did it in July and it's through canyon country. But it was early in the morning and there was this long kind of white sand beach, underneath the canyon walls. And it was kind of a slow moving spot in the current. And I pulled over, I was in a canoe, pulled my canoe over and I laid down a cloth and I lay down on top of it. And I just felt my whole body against the sand. And I could hear the sound of the river. I could almost feel sort of the vibrations of the earth um, against my skin. And there was a raven calling, it was echoing down the canyon. That was just this moment that had it all going on. Makes me really happy to think of that.
Lovely. Florence, thank you so much for joining us on Humans Outside today. I so appreciate your time.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for having me on.
That's a wrap on this episode of Humans Outside. But hey, I need your help. Enjoy this show? Leave a 5-star rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. It makes me feel good, but it also helps others find the show too, which is cool, right? Now, go get outside. Until next time, we'll see you out there.